What if I told you that the magnificent mansions of the past were not a paradise, but a veritable factory for processing human labor? Behind their luxurious facades lay a world where every inch of splendor was paid for with hours of grueling work. You see only gilded moldings and gleaming parquet floors, but behind it all is an invisible army whose lives were subject to a strict rhythm. This rhythm was dictated not by people's desires, but by the needs of the house itself, which required constant care, like a living, insatiable creature. We are accustomed to romanticizing that era, imagining balls and tea parties, but the reality was much more prosaic and difficult. Dust, soot, and coal were eternal enemies that had to be fought daily, without weekends or holidays. Watch the video to the end to find out how this ideal cleanliness was achieved and why ordinary laundry could become a dangerous health hazard. Are you ready to learn the truth about how a Victorian house actually functioned? This building was not just a dwelling, but a complex mechanism that required constant lubrication with sweat and the efforts of servants. The architecture of the mansion was specifically designed to separate the lives of the owners and those who served them. There were separate staircases, corridors, and even entrances so that these two worlds would never intersect unnecessarily. Servants moved around the house like ghosts, doing their work unobtrusively and silently. Their main task was to create the illusion that order was maintained by itself, as if by magic. The hierarchy within this mechanism was strict and did not allow any deviations from the established rules. Everyone knew their place, their duties, and the territory for which they were personally responsible. The junior maids did the dirtiest and hardest work, often without looking up from the floor. The older ones kept order, controlling every movement of their subordinates with relentless severity. This system worked like clockwork, where any hiccup could lead to chaos throughout the entire huge house. One person's mistake inevitably affected the work of the others, causing a chain reaction of problems. The morning in such a house began long before sunrise, in complete darkness and silence. The first thing to do was to open the shutters, letting the cold morning light into the rooms. Then began the endless tour of the estate to check that everything was ready for the awakening of the owners. Each room had to look as if no one had ever lived in it, maintaining perfect freshness. This required incredible concentration and attention to the smallest details of the interior. Silence was another prerequisite for the functioning of this living organism. Servants were forbidden to talk loudly, laugh, or make any unnecessary noise. They communicated with each other in whispers, even when in their own quarters. The sound of footsteps was muffled by soft shoes or carpets in the master's part of the house. The house had to appear to be a peaceful haven where nothing disturbed the owner's tranquility. Particular attention was paid to doors and thresholds, which served as boundaries between worlds. One could only enter a room after knocking and receiving permission. Leaving the door open was considered a gross violation of etiquette and safety rules. Each entrance and exit was accompanied by a specific ritual, practiced to the point of automatism. This created the feeling that the walls of the house themselves dictated the rules of behavior. Cleaning tools were cared for and stored with the same care as silverware. Brushes, rags, buckets. Each item had its own strictly defined place. The loss or breakage of equipment was considered a serious incident. Servants often repaired their own tools, adapting them to their needs. It was part of their professional pride and responsibility to the house. Time in the mansion flowed completely differently for the owners and for those who served them. For some, it was hours of leisure and receptions. For others, in an endless series of tasks. The daily schedule was planned down to the minute, and any delay disrupted the entire schedule. Even meals for the staff were quick so that they could return to their duties as soon as possible. Life at home never stopped, even in the middle of the night. Relationships between servants within this system often resembled life in a barracks. They slept in shared rooms, shared meager meals, and rare moments of rest. This brought them together, but also led to conflicts due to fatigue. Mutual assistance was necessary to survive in this endless cycle of chores. Everyone understood that they were just a cog in the huge machine of Victorian life. This invisible mechanism consumed people entirely, leaving no room for personal life. Names were often replaced by job titles or nicknames convenient for the owners. People dissolved into their roles, becoming part of the interior, like furniture or curtains. But without this sacrifice, without this daily feat, the glittering world of Victorian luxury would simply cease to exist. Do you agree with this? Please tell us what you think about this. Every opinion is valuable. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more stories like this. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the comfort of the past? The main source of heat and, at the same time, the main enemy of cleanliness in a Victorian home was coal. Fireplaces, which we are used to seeing in beautiful pictures as a symbol of comfort, were in fact sources of endless dirt. Every morning began with the need to clean out the ashes and burnt remains from dozens of fireplaces throughout the house. This work was one of the dirtiest and most harmful to breathing. Soot, greasy and sticky, settled on the skin, clothes, and hair, eating into them. The process of cleaning the fireplace required not only strength, but also a certain skill. First, the ashes had to be carefully removed, trying not to raise a cloud of dust into the room. For this, special brushes and scoops were used, working slowly and carefully. Then the cast iron grate had to be rubbed with a special compound, black lead. This substance gave the metal a noble shine, but was extremely unpleasant to work with. Polishing the fireplace grate to a mirror shine took a considerable amount of time. The maid knelt on the hard floor, rubbing the paste into the cold metal. The movements had to be rhythmic and strong to achieve the desired effect. The slightest speck of rust or dullness could provoke the housekeeper's wrath. It was a daily battle for shine that resumed every morning. But cleaning was only half the battle, because the fireplaces also had to be stoked. Coal was stored in the basements and had to be carried to all floors of the huge mansion. The buckets of coal, known as coal boxes, were heavy and awkward to carry. The servants had to make dozens of trips up and down the steep stairs. It was a real physical workout, comparable to the work of a dock worker. Each fireplace required a certain amount of fuel depending on the size of the room. In the reception rooms, the fire had to burn brightly and cheerfully, creating a festive atmosphere. In the bedrooms, it was necessary to maintain a steady heat so that the owners would be comfortable. The ability to stack coal correctly so that it did not smoke and gave off maximum heat was highly valued. A mistake could result in the room filling with acrid smoke. Coal dust was everywhere, penetrating even the most closed cupboards and drawers. It settled on expensive velvet curtains, light-colored wallpaper, and snow-white linen. Dealing with this black dust was a Sisyphean task. It seemed that as soon as you turned your back, a thin layer of gray dust would cover the surfaces again. Cleaning up after lighting the fireplaces was a mandatory ritual. Delivering coal to the upper floors, where the children's rooms and governesses' rooms were located, was particularly difficult. The servants' staircases were often narrow and poorly lit, which increased the risk of falling. Carrying a heavy bucket in one hand while holding onto the railing with the other was a real balancing act. By the end of the day, the muscles in the back and arms ached from constant tension. And then there were the buckets of cold ashes to carry back downstairs. In winter, the demand for coal increased many times over, turning the servants' lives into an endless conveyor belt. The fireplaces in the main rooms were lit from early morning until late at night. This meant that the person on duty had to constantly monitor the fire, adding new portions of coal. The flames could not be allowed to go out while the owners were in the room. Cold in a Victorian house was considered a sign of bad taste and poor service. Even storing coal required organization and control to ensure that supplies did not suddenly run out. Coal dust covered everything in the basement with a thick layer, turning it into a black kingdom. The servants responsible for delivering fuel often looked like miners after a shift. They had to wash themselves thoroughly before appearing before their masters. The contrast between the dirty basement and the clean living room was striking. Coal provided warmth, but it also took away the health of those who worked with it. Constant inhalation of coal dust and soot affected the lungs, but no one complained because it was an integral part of life in a large house. The house breathed smoke, and someone had to keep it breathing. In the next chapter, you will learn about the dangerous chemicals the servants had to work with to achieve the perfect shine on the silver. What I am about to show you is banned in 12 countries in the modern world due to its toxicity, but back then it was the norm. Polishing silverware in the Victorian era was not just cleaning, but a sacred ritual involving dangerous chemicals. Huge collections of forks, spoons, trays, and sauce boats demanded a dazzling shine. Dull silver was considered a disgrace to the home and a sign of a lazy butler. Therefore, a real laboratory was set up in the storerooms, where a wide variety of powders and liquids were used. The main cleaning agent was a mixture that was often prepared by the servants themselves according to secret recipes. It consisted of chalk, alcohol, ammonia, and a special red powder called crocus. Ammonia had a pungent, suffocating odor that made your eyes water and took your breath away. They had to work with it in poorly ventilated rooms, inhaling toxic fumes for hours. But it was ammonia that gave that unique shine that was so highly prized. The process began with thoroughly washing each item in hot, soapy water. Grease and food residue had to be completely removed, otherwise the polishing would be ruined. The silver was then dried with soft towels, leaving no trace of moisture. Only then was the cleaning paste applied. It was rubbed into the metal with fingers or special leather cloths. The worst enemy of silver was not dirt, but oxidation from the air and egg yolks. Dark spots appeared with frightening speed, requiring immediate intervention. The servants rubbed the metal so diligently that by the end of the day their fingers were numb. The skin on their hands became rough, cracked, and darkened from constant contact with chemicals and metal. These hands were living proof of hard labor. Special soft brushes made of natural bristles were used for complex patterns and engravings. It was necessary to clean the paste from each curl without damaging the soft metal. The dried paste remaining in the recesses looked sloppy and was unacceptable. This required precision and enormous patience. Often they even had to use their own fingernails, wrapped in cloth. Special attention was paid to the huge decorative items that stood on the sideboards. Heavy candlesticks and soup tureens had to be taken apart to clean each joint. These items were quite heavy and had to be handled with extreme care. One awkward movement could result in a dent or scratch on a precious item. The responsibility for the safety of the silver rested on the shoulders of the butler. After polishing, the final step was to apply a final shine with suede. This was the longest and most monotonous process, requiring rhythmic movements. The silver had to shine so that one could see one's reflection in it without distortion. Hundreds of items passed through the hands of the servants before each dinner party. The mountain of dishes seemed endless, but every item had to be flawless. In addition to physical fatigue, there was constant psychological tension due to the value of the items. The silver was regularly counted, checking against special inventory books. The loss of even a single teaspoon was cause for panic and investigation. The servants lived under the yoke of suspicion, afraid of being accused of theft. This added to the nervousness of an already difficult job. Polished silver was stored in special cases lined with soft fabric or in safes. The air in the storage room had to be dry to slow down the tarnishing process. Sometimes the items were wrapped in special paper, impregnated with chemicals. All these precautions only postponed the next cleaning for a short time. The cycle repeated itself over and over, like everything else in that house. The price of this shine was measured not only in the cost of polish, but also in people's health. Inhaling chalk dust and ammonia fumes day after day undermined the servants' health. But no one thought about toxicity when it came to the family's prestige. The gleaming silver on the table was a status symbol that had to be maintained at all costs. Like this, if you are impressed by this hard labor for the sake of clean forks, are you ready for the shocking truth that laundry day was the worst day of the week? In a Victorian home, this process had nothing to do with pressing a button on a washing machine. It was a large-scale military operation that usually began on Monday and lasted several days. Preparations began the night before, when the laundry was sorted and soaked in huge vats. The smell of dampness and lye filled the utility rooms, foreshadowing the hard work ahead. The most important piece of equipment was a huge copper boiler built into the brickwork. The water in it had to be boiled, which required a huge amount of coal and firewood. The laundresses worked in clouds of hot steam, which made it difficult to breathe and see anything. The humidity in the laundry room was so high that water dripped down the walls. It was like a real bathhouse, only instead of relaxation, hard labor reigned here. The laundry was rubbed by hand on groove boards, scraping the skin off the knuckles until they bled. They used harsh soap with a high alkali content, which corroded their hands. Stains from soot, grease, and street dirt required incredible effort to remove. Every towel and pillowcase went through this merciless cleaning process. Huge sheets, saturated with water, became impossible to lift. Washing women's dresses with numerous ruffles and lace was particularly difficult. They could not simply be rubbed, they required a delicacy that was incompatible with fatigue. Small details had to be washed separately for fear of damaging the fragile fabric. Various natural bleaches were often used to restore the original whiteness of the items. Any mistake could cost the laundress her job. After washing, the clothes were rinsed in ice-cold water to remove any soap residue. The laundress's hands instantly turned red and lost sensitivity from the temperature change. The water had to be changed several times until it became completely clear. This meant carrying heavy buckets and constant contact with water. The women's backs were bent over deep tubs for hours on end. To wring out the laundry, they used primitive but dangerous mechanical wringers with wooden rollers. Wet fabric was passed between them by turning a heavy handle. There was a constant risk of pinching fingers or pulling the edge of the garment into the mechanism. This work required the coordinated actions of two people. One turned the handle, the other fed the laundry. Water flowed in streams onto the stone floor, turning it into a skating rink. Drying laundry in the English climate was a separate headache for the staff. If it was raining outside, which happened constantly, everything was hung on special dryers under the ceiling of the kitchen or laundry room. The damp sheets created a maze that had to be navigated. The air in the house became heavy and damp, which did not add to the joy of the inhabitants. The smell of boiled laundry permeated everything around. Starching was a mandatory step for collars, cuffs, and tablecloths. A hot starch solution was prepared in large basins, stirring constantly. The fabric had to be soaked evenly so that it would hold its shape but not stand stiff. This required experience and intuition, which were developed over many years. An incorrectly starched shirt could rub the owner's neck. The whole process required enormous physical effort and endurance. Laundry workers often suffered from rheumatism and joint diseases due to constant dampness. Their working day on busy laundry days could last 14-16 hours. By evening, they were exhausted, but they knew that in a week, it would all happen again. It was an endless cycle of laundry in nature. Clean clothes were a marker of social status, and this marker was paid for with the health of women. The whiteness of a gentleman's shirt hid the red, swollen hands of the laundress. None of the guests thought about the price of this freshness. Washing was not just a household chore, but a real feat of endurance. In the next chapter, you will learn how ordinary sand helped to deal with grease in the kitchen. The kitchen and pantry were the heart of the home, but for the servants, they became a field of endless battle with grease. There were no modern detergents that dissolved dirt in seconds. The kitchen worker's arsenal consisted only of sand, soda, and her own muscles. Huge copper pots and pans had to be cleaned daily to prevent oxidation and keep them shining like gold. Copper is a capricious metal, and without proper care, it quickly darkens and becomes toxic. Dishes were washed in stone sinks, often in cold or lukewarm water. Hot water was a valuable resource that was saved for the owners in laundry. Grease had to be scrubbed off plates mechanically, using stiff brushes and rags. The dishwasher's hands were constantly in dirty, greasy water. The skin became rough, covered with cracks and unhealed wounds from soda. Knife cleaning was a special task, as knives at that time were not yet made of stainless steel. Carbon steel cut perfectly, but rusted at the slightest contact with moisture or fruit juice. Special boards sprinkled with abrasive powder or knife cleaning machines were used to clean the blades. The movements had to be quick and precise to remove the coating without dulling the blade. Hundreds of knives went through this procedure after every large reception. The kitchen floor, laid with stone slabs, also required special care. It was washed while kneeling using sand, which acted as a scrub. The joints between the stones were cleaned until they were white, which required incredible diligence. The cold from the stone penetrated through clothing, causing chronic knee problems. The cleanliness of the floor was checked with particular attention by the head cook. The huge cast iron stoves on which food was cooked were black monsters that devoured coal. Their surfaces had to be regularly cleaned of burnt food and grease. Fat dripping onto the hot metal turned into a hard crust that had to be literally chipped off. Then the stove was blackened again with a special paste, just like the fireplaces. This was done while the stove was still warm, which added to the discomfort. Solid wood cutting tables were scraped with knives and brushes until the wood was white. No traces of blood, fish, or vegetables were to remain in the walls of the wood. This was an important sanitary measure to prevent poisoning. The tables were huge and their surface seemed endless to entire dishwasher. The smell of raw wood and soda was a constant companion of the room. Garbage and food waste were taken out in special bins in the backyard. In the absence of plastic bags, buckets had to be washed after each trip. The smell of rotting waste attracted unwanted guests, so keeping the bins clean was a matter of safety. This dirty work usually fell to the youngest servants. The heavy buckets strained the arms, adding to the physical strain. The pantries also required constant inspection and cleaning. Sacks of flour, barrels of sugar, crates of vegetables. All of this had to be sorted through and aired out. Dust and cobwebs were unacceptable where food for the masters was stored. The shelves were wiped with vinegar to repel insects and mold. Keeping the pantry tidy was the pride of the cook and a headache for her assistants. Glass and crystal were washed with special care in wooden basins, so as not to break them. Soft rags and warm water with alcohol were used to make them shine. Each glass was wiped dry with a linen towel and checked against the light. Fingerprints on the glass were considered bad form. After the ball, there could be hundreds of crystal items to clean. The kitchen staff worked in conditions of constant temperature, humidity fluctuations. The heat from the stove was replaced by the cold of the pantry or the draft from the backyard. This was as exhausting as physical labor, but the kitchen had to work smoothly, serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner exactly on schedule. Are you ready to learn why evenings in a Victorian home were truly explosive? Lighting a large mansion was a complex engineering and logistical challenge that posed a real risk to life. Before the advent of electricity, homes were lit by candles, oil lamps, and gas. Each of these sources required specific and labor-intensive maintenance. A footman or a special lamplighter would spend hours preparing the house for nightfall. Oil lamps were the most capricious devices in the house. They had to be refilled daily, taking care not to spill oil on expensive carpets or furniture. The wicks had to be trimmed regularly. If left too long, the lamp would smoke. If too short, it would give off little light. This was done with special scissors and great care. The charred ends of the wicks stained the hands with soot that was difficult to wash off. The glass bulbs of the lamps became covered with soot after one evening of use. They were washed in hot water, wiped dry with special paper, and polished until transparent. The glass was thin and fragile, often breaking in the hands and causing cuts. Spare bulbs were always kept on hand, but breaking them was considered wasteful. The smell of kerosene or oil permeated the clothes of the servants who took care of the lamps. Gas lighting, although more modern, carried a hidden threat. Gas horns hissed, consumed oxygen, and emitted combustion products that blackened the ceilings. A gas leak could lead to poisoning or even an explosion, which was not uncommon. Servants had to carefully monitor each burner, checking that they were working properly. Ventilating rooms became vital. Candles, seemingly the safest option, also caused a lot of trouble. Wax candles were expensive, and their stubs were carefully collected for remelting or use in utility rooms. Tallow candles were cheaper, but they smelled awful and produced a lot of smoke when burned. Candlesticks had to be cleaned of drips of hardened wax without scratching the surface. It was painstaking work that required a keen eye. Lighting the lights in the evening turned into a whole ritual of going around the house. A servant went from room to room with a long torch or a special device. It was necessary to light the lights everywhere before the owners entered the room. Leaving the corridor dark was considered an unacceptable oversight. In the morning, it was necessary to go around again to extinguish the lights. Soot from all these light sources settled on the walls, paintings, and moldings. This significantly increased the amount of cleaning and dusting work. The wallpaper darkened faster and had to be cleaned with breadcrumbs. The ceilings required regular whitewashing to hide the traces of soot. Light provided comfort, but it took away cleanliness. In summer, working with lighting was especially exhausting because of the heat. Burning lamps and gas heated the air in the rooms, making it stuffy. Servants were drenched in sweat as they serviced the ceiling lights on stepladders. In winter, drafts posed a danger as the flames could spread to the curtains. Fire safety was a constant headache. The chandeliers in the ballrooms were monumental structures made of crystal and bronze. To clean such a chandelier or replace the candles in it, it had to be lowered on a special mechanism or reached by a tall ladder. Hundreds of crystal pendants were wiped by hand with a mixture of alcohol and water. This took a whole day's work for several people. The brilliance of the chandelier was the result of a team effort. Thus, light in a Victorian home was not a given, but the result of constant labor and vigilance. Every ray of light in a dark corridor was lit, maintained, and paid for by someone at risk. Darkness was the natural state, and light was a luxury that required sacrifice. In the next chapter, you will learn how tea leaves helped in the fight against the main enemy of any home: dust. The fight against dust in a Victorian mansion resembled an endless war against an invisible army. Dust penetrated everywhere, from the street through cracks in the windows, from fireplaces, from clothes and shoes. Heavy velvet curtains, thick pile carpets, and upholstered furniture acted as giant dust collectors. Without vacuum cleaners, servants had to resort to tricks and brute force to knock the dirt out of the fabric. Cleaning carpets was one of the most labor-intensive tasks. Wet tea leaves were used to clean carpets. They were scattered over the pile, left to lie for a while to absorb the dust and refresh the color. Then a maid kneeling on the floor swept the tea leaves into a dustpan with a stiff brush. This allowed the dirt to be collected without raising clouds of dust into the air. The smell of wet tea mixed with the smell of wax and old wood. Furniture with carved legs and intricate decorations was a nightmare for the cleaning lady. Dust clogged every curl of the carving, from where it had to be picked out with special brushes. Polished furniture was wiped with silk cloths and oil to hide scratches and add shine. The bookcases in the library required all books to be removed and shaken out regularly. The thud of a book being closed was the sound of endless work. Carpets and pillows were beaten in the backyard. Heavy rolls were taken out into the street, hung on crossbars and beaten with woven beaters. The sounds of the blows carried throughout the neighborhood, and clouds of gray dust flew out of the carpets. This required considerable physical strength, especially if the carpet was large. In rainy weather, this work became impossible, and dust accumulated inside. Special attention was paid to baseboards and cornices, which were difficult to reach. Maids balanced on stepladders, risking falling, to brush cobwebs off the ceiling. They used long brushes on sticks wrapped in soft cloth. It was essential that guests did not see a single cobweb when they looked up. The high ceilings of Victorian houses made this task particularly difficult. Fabric wallpaper on the walls was cleaned with stale bread. The bread was rolled down the wall. collecting soot and dirt without damaging the fabric. It was a slow and laborious process that required a large amount of bread. The crumbs fell to the floor, adding to the sweeping work. The walls absorbed odors and smoke, so cleaning them was necessary to keep the air fresh. The figurines, vases, and other knickknacks that filled Victorian living rooms had to be dusted daily. Each porcelain figurine was picked up, wiped down, and placed back in exactly the same spot. One awkward movement could destroy a valuable item. This dance with a rag around fragile objects required maximum concentration. The windows were washed with a mixture of water, vinegar, and newspaper for shine. In a city full of factory smoke, the windows were covered with a greasy film within a couple of days. Washing the windows on the outside of the upper floors was a dangerous feat. Maids leaned out of the windows, holding on to the frame with one hand to wipe the glass. The fear of heights had to be suppressed for the sake of cleanliness. The battle against dust was never won. It was only a temporary truce. The next morning, the sun would treacherously illuminate the dust particles swirling in the air again, and the maids would pick up their brushes and rags once more. It was a never-ending Sisyphean task. Servants' morning began when their masters were having their sweetest dreams. Getting up at 5 or 6 a.m. was the norm, regardless of what time the previous day had ended. The first few hours were the most intense, a real race against time. All the dirty work had to be done before the master's world woke up. The house had to be warm and clean when the owners arrived. The first thing to do was to light the stove to heat the water. Hot water was needed everywhere, for the master's shave, for the ladies' morning ablutions, for tea. Servants ran up the stairs with huge copper jugs of hot water. The water cooled quickly, so delivery had to be lightning fast. The heavy jugs weighed down their arms, and the boiling water splashed, burning their fingers. Shoe cleaning was the responsibility of the valet or footman. Dozens of pairs of boots and shoes had to be cleaned of street dirt, waxed and polished to a mirror shine. Dirty shoes in the hall were unacceptable. They used goudelin, brushes, and polishers, working in the dark hallway. The smell of wax mixed with the aroma of morning coffee. In the living rooms and dining room, the traces of the previous evening had to be removed. Cigar butts, ashes, dirty glasses, all of this disappeared as if by magic. The rooms were aired out to get rid of stale air. Fresh newspapers were ironed so that the printing ink would dry and not stain the gentleman's hands. This small detail speaks to a maniacal attention to comfort. Preparing the owner's clothes was a separate ritual. The valet and maid prepared suits and dresses, checking every button. Clothes were cleaned with brushes, steamed, and laid out in strict order. The servant had to anticipate what the master would want to wear based on the weather and schedule. This required observation and a good memory. Breakfast for the servants was rushed, often eaten standing up or on the go. It was simple porridge or bread with tea, fuel for the body, not a pleasure. Time for eating was allocated on a residual basis. The main thing was that the master's breakfast was served on time and impeccably. The silver lids of the dishes had to shine. Cleaning the front entrance and porch was the calling card of the house. The steps were washed and rubbed with a special stone until they were white. The brass door handle and knocker were polished every morning. Passers-by judged the house by the condition of its porch, so shoddy work was not an option. The cold morning wind was no excuse. All this hustle and bustle took place in absolute silence. The servants learned to open doors silently, walk on tiptoe, and not clatter with dishes. Any loud noise could wake the owners up early and cause anger. This created a tense atmosphere of secrecy. The house hummed with work, but it hummed silently. By the time the family woke up, the servants had already been on their feet for several hours and had completed half of their daily quota. They stood in starched aprons, fresh and neat, hiding their fatigue. For the owners, the day was just beginning, but for the servants, it was already in full swing. This invisible morning race was the foundation of the entire day. It was during these hours that the rhythm of life in the mansion was set. If something went wrong in the morning, the whole day could go awry. Therefore, the senior servants monitored discipline with particular strictness. Being 5 minutes late could be grounds for dismissal. In an era when running water was rare or unreliable, delivering water was extremely hard physical labor. Water was needed everywhere, in bedrooms, kitchens, and laundry rooms. Most of this water was carried on the shoulders and arms of servants who became living pipelines. Mansions had several floors, and every liter had to be carried up the stairs. The morning ablutions of the owners required hot and cold water to be delivered to the bedrooms. Each room had wash basins with basins and jugs. The maid brought a heavy jug covered with a towel to keep it warm. After washing, the dirty, soapy water had to be carried back downstairs. This water journey was repeated several times a day for each member of the family. Taking a bath was a complex logistical operation. Bathtubs were often portable and placed in front of the fireplace in the bedroom. It took many buckets of hot water to fill such a tub. A chain of servants with buckets climbed the stairs, trying not to spill a drop on the carpets. After bathing, the water had to be scooped out and carried away, which was even more difficult. Sanitation was a delicate but laborious issue. Night pots and portable toilets, known as commodes, had to be emptied and washed every morning. This was the most unpleasant duty performed by the junior maids. The contents were taken to special places, and the dishes were thoroughly disinfected. The smell of chlorine and carbolic acid was a frequent companion to this process. The kitchen had a tremendous need for water. Washing vegetables, dishes, floors, cooking, everything required clean water. If the house had a pump, it was often located in the basement or backyard. Pumping water required physical strength, which made the muscles ache. Kitchen workers spent hours simply pumping water from the source into buckets. Water filtration was primitive but necessary. Water was often passed through charcoal filters or boiled to avoid disease. The butler or housekeeper was responsible for the quality of drinking water. Water jugs in the rooms always had to be full and fresh. Stale water was considered a sign of negligence. On laundry days, water consumption increased significantly. Buckets had to be carried to the laundry room continuously. Wet laundry weighed 3 times more than dry laundry, adding to the burden of carrying it. Water was a heavy element that dictated working conditions. The servants' backs suffered from constant axial stress. Even watering the houseplants in the winter garden required water delivery. Palm trees and ferns, which were fashionable at the time, loved moisture. The gardener or footman would go around the greenhouse with watering cans, keeping the green corner alive. It only seemed like easy work from the outside. The sewage system, if there was one, often clogged and required cleaning. It was a dirty and disgusting job, which was also done by servants or hired workers. The smell from the pipes could spoil the atmosphere in the house, so it was strictly monitored. Modern conveniences were introduced slowly and often coexisted with archaic methods. Water was a symbol of life and purity, but its delivery was a symbol of slave labor. Every glass of clean water on the table cost someone's effort. Servants were the atlases who kept the water balance of the house on their shoulders. Without their legs and backs, the taps, if there were any, would have remained dry. Ironing laundry in the Victorian era was a test of heat and weight. Perfectly ironed clothes without a single crease were a mandatory requirement of etiquette. A wrinkled shirt or dress could ruin the reputation of a gentleman or lady. To achieve this result, laundresses used heavy cast iron irons that were heated on the stove. These irons were called sad irons, perhaps because of their weight and the fatigue they caused. Ironing laundry in the Victorian era was a test of heat and weight. Perfectly ironed clothes without a single crease were a mandatory requirement of etiquette. A wrinkled shirt or dress could ruin the reputation of a gentleman or lady. To achieve this result, laundresses used heavy cast iron irons that were heated on the stove. These irons were called sad irons, perhaps because of their weight and the fatigue they caused. The temperature of the iron was checked using an old-fashioned method, by holding it to the cheek. If the metal was at the right temperature, it was ready to iron. A mistake of 1 degree could result in expensive fabric being hopelessly ruined by a burn mark. The smell of burnt fabric was the worst smell in the ironing room. The risk of ruining an item kept the laundress in a constant state of tension. The iron could weigh several kilograms. Moving such a load across the fabric for hours was equivalent to heavy athletics. The laundress's wrists and shoulders were constantly sore from chronic overexertion, but the pressure had to be strong to smooth out thick linen or cotton. A weak hand could not cope with stiff folds. Special tools were used for complex clothing details such as ruffles, frills, and puff sleeves. Crimping tongs, similar to scissors with tubes, were heated and used to curl the fabric. It was precision work that required a steady hand. Every fold on a lady's dress was the result of painstaking work with hot metal. Starch-treated items were particularly difficult to iron. The hot iron could stick to the starch, leaving a dirty mark. The sole plate of the iron had to be constantly cleaned with salt or wax to ensure it glided perfectly. The cleanliness of the tool was the key to clean laundry. The slightest speck of dust on the iron would transfer to a snow-white shirt. The ironing room was always unbearably hot, especially in summer. The hot stove, hot irons, and steam from damp laundry created a sauna effect. Women worked in a semi-fainting state, drenched in sweat. Ventilation was often poor, so as not to chill the overheated workers with drafts. Not only clothes had to be ironed, but also bed linen, tablecloths, and napkins. Huge tablecloths required 2 people to work on them, so as not to crease the already ironed areas. A perfectly folded pile of laundry was the pride of the laundress. The geometry of the folds was checked by the housekeeper with a ruler in her eyes. This work was dangerous due to the risk of burns. The hands of ironers were often covered with scars from accidental contact with hot metal. Fatigue dulled their attention, and injuries were common, but they couldn't stop as the mountain of laundry never diminished. The iron was a symbol of civilization and neatness, but for those who held it, it was an instrument of daily torture. The perfect smoothness of the fabric concealed the harsh reality of hard physical labor. Every flawless fold on the prom queen's dress was paid for with the sweat of a woman in a stuffy room. We took a look behind the scenes of Victorian luxury and saw that the ideal life of the past was built on the bones and health of invisible workers. A mansion was not just a house, but a voracious monster that required coal, water, and human labor. The shine of silver, the whiteness of linen, and the warmth of fireplaces all came at a high price, which was not customary to discuss in polite society. This system was maintained by the strict discipline and self-sacrifice of thousands of people whose names have been lost to history. They transformed chaos and filth into order and beauty, remaining in the shadows. Their labor was the foundation of that great era we call the Golden Age. Which of the duties of Victorian servants would you definitely not be able to perform? Write in the comments what horrified you the most: washing clothes in boiling water or cleaning chimneys. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new investigations into the mysteries of history.